Welcome to Canadian Cannabis License Producer Application Process Part 3, Completing and Submitting Your Application. My name is Abby, and I will be your narrator for this session. This slide contains the requirements under the Cannabis License Application Process, which you will have to cover. The first one, cannabis license classes and subclasses, we have already gone over for you in a prior video. So you can take a look at that. And the rest, just browse through quickly and get a sense of what you will need. Many of these are covered in this video. However, others such as your organizational security plan and site and building details, good production practices are covered in great detail in other videos. The contents on this slide are the ones that are covered in this video. Getting started with your Cannabis Tracking License Systems CTLS account. Create and set up an account in the CTLS with Health Canada. Provide basic information including your full name and title, email address, phone number, date of birth, language preference, and security information. You will receive an account ID and an access code from Health Canada that can be used to enter the CTLS thereafter. Note, individuals who require security clearance must submit their security clearance application prior to submitting the license application in the CTLS. This is advisable and beneficial to you because it will save you time and it will prevent you from getting your application rejected based on delay. Let's take a look at the cannabis classes and subclasses and how you can decide what you want to do or what kind of license to apply for. Under the first column, it says I want to. The second column, the license I need to apply for is, and in the third column, this allows me to. So in the second row, we're looking at make cannabis products. On a large scale, that would be a standard processing license, and that would allow me to manufacture cannabis products. On a small scale, this will allow me to use equal to or less than the equivalent of 600 kilograms of dried cannabis per year. That is a microprocessing license, and that will allow me to do the same type of manufacturing as the standard processor, just on a smaller scale. So I'd be able to manufacture cannabis products, but it'll have to be less than 600 or equal to 600 kilogram of dried cannabis per annum. Security clearance. What is it? Who needs it? So what is security clearance? Well, security clearance is a requirement under the cannabis regulations for issuance of a licensed producer's license. Refusal to provide the information requested on the form will result in refusal to process the licensed producer's application. The personal information collected by Health Canada will be used to process the application. The personal information collected by Health Canada will also be disclosed to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, for the purpose of conducting a criminal record check and a check of the relevant files of other law enforcement agencies, including intelligence gathered for law enforcement purposes. In some cases, personal information may be disclosed without your consent for other purposes pursuant to subsection 8, paragraph 2 of the Privacy Act. So the security check. Health Canada will conduct a security check, and in so doing will seek, verify, assess, collect, and retain for a period of 2 years after the expiry date of the license holder's license any and all information relevant to the application, including any criminal records, any and all information contained in law enforcement files, information with respect to immigration and citizenship status, any and all information that will facilitate the conduct of a security assessment. The information obtained and retained by Health Canada includes intelligence gathered for law enforcement purposes, non-conviction information, charges before the court, findings of guilt or convictions, and court orders registered in your name in the National Repository of Criminal Records and local records that are available to police services. There's also personnel security clearance application requirements. So each personnel requiring a security clearance must submit a security clearance application in the CTLS with the following information: biographical information, criminal charges and convictions, any kind of traveling or time spent out of the country. So, and they must have a signed consent, and then they'll submit the application prior to submitting. Now, this is your security clearance, so you'll submit this prior to submitting the license producer's application. There is a requirement to give notice to local authorities, and in so doing, you will provide a copy of the notice to the local government, the local fire authority, the local police force or RCMP that is responsible for the policing service in your area. Note that you're not required to give notice to the local authorities for classes that do not entail possession of cannabis. You need to be familiar with some key pieces of information. These include requirements set out in federal acts and regulations, provincial territorial legislation, municipal bylaws, the Cannabis Tracking and Licensing System, and of course the Cannabis Act and its regulations. So you'll create your CTLS account. You'll inform all required individuals associated with the proposed license holder to create a CTLS account. So everyone who's associated, we'll cover those individuals in a little while. You'll apply for a security clearance. You'll identify your license class and subclass of interest, create corporate account if necessary, and create an application and gather all information. Submit the application. So a key investor is a person or an organization that is in a position to exercise direct or indirect control over the license holder. Key individuals at the facility who must be identified. The applicant should create a list of all account IDs of individuals associated with the application, and the account IDs are used to link individuals to an application in the CTLS. The applicant must ensure that the persons identified have the knowledge, qualifications, experience, and ability to fulfill his or her responsibilities. An individual may hold one or multiple roles within the company for one or more classes of licenses at any one site, or in some cases, multiple sites, assuming he or she meets all the requirements. Note, the CTLS requires at least one director or officer named per corporate profile. If there is no director or officer for the organization, the responsible person should be identified as an officer in the applicable section of the CTLS. So key individuals and their roles. The key individuals have high responsibility in the cannabis company and must be identified by name, role, account IDs, and must have security clearance. And these are the directors. So if the applicant is a corporation or a cooperative, you'll need to have the directors. The officers, responsible person in charge, head of security, the master grower, quality assurance person, and any individual partners, corporation, or cooperative directors and officers in a position to directly control the applicant. The responsible person or responsible person in charge is the main point of contact for Health Canada and is a key individual who must be designated for all applications, who has the authority to bind the license holder and has the overall responsibility for the activities conducted and also for submitting the application. Other key persons are found on a previous slide that is named key individuals at the facility who must be identified. Site personnel requirements. Specific individuals must be identified. These must have security clearances and be associated with an application in the CTLS as follows. So for cultivation, standard micro nursery, you have to have a head of security or an alternate and a master grower or an alternate. For processor, standard or micro, you need a head of security or an alternate or quality assurance person or an alternate. And for sale for medical cannabis purpose, you need a head of security or an alternate. The responsible person must be identified within the license ownership section of the CTLS. Site ownership requirements. The site owner, if the site is owned by the individual or the corporation applying for the license, must be indicated by linking his or her account ID in the CTLS. And if the site is owned by another individual or individuals or corporation, a site owner consent form is required. There's a corporate profile requirement, and you'll have to produce the full name of the organization, any other names registered federally or provincially, the incorporation number, business address, contact details, head office address and phone for correspondence, not the personal applicant's name, controlling organizations, corporate ID of each controlling organization, and certificate of incorporation or partnership. And in the case of a partnership or cooperative, a partnership cooperative agreement. So also corporate organizational chart listing all the personnel in the organization will have to be created and submitted. There are site details requirements, including activities that are carried on the site, and the requirements differ depending on the license class, as some classes do not need to submit production capacity. Site evidence submission is required. So for processing, cultivation, and sale for medical purposes with possession licenses, a site evidence submission must be received by Health Canada before an application can be considered. Site evidence package submissions must be received by Health Canada within 10 business days following the submission of the application in the CTLS. So you have to make sure you're prepared ahead of time to prevent delays. Applicants who do not submit their site evidence package within the time frame may have their application refused as incomplete. Good production practices report. As part of the licensing application process, the applicant is required to provide a good production practices report that clearly demonstrates how the GPP, or the good production practices requirements under the cannabis regulations, will be met. This report includes submitting a list of standard operating procedures for facility, building, personnel, equipment, utilities, system, computers, and more. When you have completed your application, you are now required to submit all supporting material. All key persons and key investors, applicant, responsible person, personnel who are working in a facility with cannabis will have to submit certain documents and certain material. So you've submitted your application and now you want to know what your application status is. Well, here's a table that gives you your status and an explanation of what you can expect. Remember that if you have not completed your application, Health Canada will not accept it and it will continue to remain in a draft status. Well, we've reached the end of this section and we want to thank you for joining us. Our next video series are on good production practices, requirements for your cannabis company. We will be starting with part 1. If you like the videos and want more content, please show support by liking and subscribing. And don't forget to hit that bell button to receive notifications of new videos. Thank you for joining us.